And welcome everybody to our question and answer live stream. We're coming to you from our studio and theater in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside of Nashville. So glad to have you join us. As I say, we are live, which means we can take your questions, and we will be doing that throughout this entire little episode. Pam Kay, senior producer for The Huckabee Show, is with me as she normally is on Friday. She'll be reading the questions and passing them on to me, and I'll do my best to get some answers for you. Now, be sure to send your questions in the chat, or better yet, send a super chat. That's super chat. That's way better than just a chat. Somehow, I'm not sure exactly. Also, we have moderators that'll be watching the chat to make sure that we get as many of the questions as possible. Now, what can you do? Well, number one, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That'd be a great thing to do. Hit the notification bell. And during the course of our live stream today, be sure and leave us a comment. Tell us what you like and don't. And of course, in sort of internet language, hit the like button. And then most importantly, share it. Share it with people that you know that are probably laying around their house eating bonbons, and they ought to be watching this live stream. The way to do it, hit the share button so it'll send it to them, and they will be awakened out of their slumber and stupor, and they will be able to join you in the live stream. Heck, they may have the best question of the day. Well, we're going to be taking a lot of them today, but first up, I want to give you a little preview. This weekend, we're going to have a wonderful guest, Winsome Sears, the brand new Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. Her election was really, pretty amazing. Of course, the whole Virginia election stunned the nation, and most specifically, it stunned the Democrat Party and the far left. Glenn Youngkin became the new governor. Winsome Sears, a Marine veteran, an immigrant, and a female who happens to be Black, won that race. And the Attorney General, who is Hispanic, won his race, all Republicans. Now, most of the time, that would be pretty significant. She's the first African-American female ever elected to a statewide office in Virginia. That's pretty significant. But to hear MSNBC and CNN talk about it, you'd have thought that she was elected so she could lead white supremacy. Now, think about how dumb that is. A Black woman, somehow she's tied to white supremacists. And yet that's exactly what Joyless Reed and others on cable news were basically saying about her. Well, the good news is she is our guest on the Huckabee Show this weekend. You do not want to miss that. But if you missed her speech, her acceptance speech, absolutely brilliant. Here's just a little taste of it right here.
There are some who want to divide us, and we must not let that happen. They would like us to believe we are back in 1963 when my father came. In case you haven't noticed, I am Black, and I have been Black all my life. It's a historic night. Yes, it is, but I didn't run to make history. I just wanted to leave it better than I found it.
And I think she's going to leave it better than she found it. She found it in a mess, thanks to the way that it's been run. And we're so excited to be able to have her on the show this weekend. And you do not want to miss that. Winsome Sears, I think she is a star in the making in the Republican Party. She's articulate, she's strong, but she's also got a warm heart. She's a solid Christian believer. She just seems to have everything that a person needs to have to show great leadership capacities. And she's a Marine. Yeah. I don't want to mess with her.
I can't wait. I cannot wait for tomorrow night.
Going to be great. If you've been watching the goings-on in Washington, I don't have to tell you that the Democrats are doing their best to spend every dime you've ever earned and all the dimes that your children and grandchildren will ever earn. And just, I guess, oblivious to the fact that her party got wiped out in Virginia and a couple of key races in New Jersey. One, the governor's race, not quite determined yet. AP's called it, of course, for the Democrat, but there's still a lot of ballots out. And nobody thought that was even going to be close. But the big news in New Jersey, a truck driver who spent $153 in his primary campaign defeated the Democrat state Senate president who'd been there for like 20-something years. This is a huge upset, absolutely monumental. So Nancy Pelosi was naturally asked, was this a precursor to what we're going to see next year, and maybe her party has gone too far. She obviously didn't want to talk about it. Let's watch.
What else? I guess it's time to take your questions. Okay.
I think I'm more eager to take your questions than she was to take their questions. That was pretty obvious. She was asked if the Democrats were being penalized for not passing the bills that they had out there. Once again, I think she proves that denial is not necessarily a river in Egypt. Let's watch.
Do you think Democrats were penalized for having not gotten these things done?
I haven't seen that and all of the analysis, and I know from my own experience that, as I've said to you before, the plural of anecdote is not data. Let's see what the data is as it comes out.
If you know what she just said, would you please send to us in the chat and tell us what she said? Because I can't make heads or tails out of that. Utter gibberish. And there's one more with her. This is when she was asked about a vote being taken on these big spending bills, when it's going to happen. And was she confident it was going to pass? And she seems to be a little annoyed by even being asked the question.
You just project this week a little bit what you expect. If you expect to vote tonight, and is it possible that you might just vote on the infrastructure bill, considering everybody seems to be bought in and saying it's ready for a vote?
No.
Okay, so let's do you anticipate a vote on Build Back Better today, and what are the big hurdles you have to overcome?
I'll let you know as soon as I wish to. But we're okay. You're just worried about your own schedule. I know that.
That was just bizarre. All I got to tell you is it's just almost painful to watch. One more. This is Joe Biden defending these bills that he has and being asked essentially the same thing, whether or not the Virginia setback for the Democrats maybe sent a message to them. I don't think they're getting it. Let's watch.
We brought out every Democrat about there was more votes than ever has been cast for a Democratic incumbent. I'm not incumbent, a Democrat running for governor. And no governor in Virginia has ever won when he's of the same or he or she's the same party as the sitting president. What I do know is, I do know that people want us to get things done. They want us to get things done. And that's why I'm continuing to push very hard for the Democratic Party to move along and pass my infrastructure bill and my Build Back Better bill.
You know, I kind of think what the people would like for them to do is to admit that parents do have a role in their children's education and that we demand something on the border in the way of security. If you're going to make everybody in America get a vaccine, but you're not going to make the illegal immigrants crossing the borders even get checked for COVID, much less have a vaccine, we'd like to kind of get some of those things straightened out. Maybe, Joe, that's why your party took a beating the other night. But, you know, it's fine with me if you guys don't get it and you keep moving to the left, because it means people on my side of the aisle are going to have a heck of a good night November of 2022. Pam, I bet by now we got some questions rolling in. So what do we got?
We do. And we will give some shout outs too, because we've got folks, Governor, watching from all over this afternoon. Cheryl Flex says, a thought just came into my head. Maybe we should be thankful that Biden is our president. How else would anybody be able to see how bad our country could get? You don't know what you've got till it's gone.
Well, and there's another saying I think applies here. You got what you wanted, but you don't really want what you got. And I think maybe that's what a lot of people are beginning to realize. While we're taking your questions, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll always know when we're going to do one of these. Hit the notification bell, leave a comment, a like, and share it with the world. And if not the whole world, at least with 2 or 3 of your closest friends. That would be great.
Absolutely. Kimberly writes today, Gov, I read your morning edition today and I'm heartbroken that Afghan families are selling their daughters as child brides to pay for food. Are there any charities that are out there that could get these girls adopted into loving homes and get money to the families in the process?
I do know that Samaritan's Purse is on the ground in Afghanistan trying to help as many families. Doctors Without Borders is another organization that is there. And there are quite a few independent groups that are operating kind of quietly and under the radar because they don't obviously want to impose danger not only upon themselves, but also the families in Afghanistan they're helping. So yes, the answer is there are charities that are doing all that they can do. Of course, they're very limited because they have to escape from the Taliban just to be able to get to these families. And they literally are doing it at the risk of their lives. It's pretty severe. Okay.
Okay, going to take you back to January 6th. Proud Patriot is writing today. Why are the January 6th Americans who were in or around the Capitol not getting their civil rights? Where are the Republicans to get them out?
Well, I think it has to play out in the courts. There has been a lot of revelations about the fact that the narrative hasn't always matched. This was not, and I want to say this as clearly as I can, January 6th was not an insurrection. That's a word that Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, it's a word that they have used to try to say it was an attempt to overthrow the government. It wasn't. Not one single gun, not one, was confiscated from any of the protesters. I've repeatedly said that I think the whole thing was a chuckle-headed move. I think some people just got caught up in the emotion, and some just kind of wandered in because they were ushered in and waved in. But there were other people who did some dumb things, like put their feet on the desk of Nancy Pelosi or take papers or something from offices. That's vandalism. That's criminal. People are going to pay a big price for that. But let's be very real. This was not an insurrection. Nobody was trying to overthrow the government. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it with something more than a broomstick. The government has nuclear weapons. They've got fighter jets. They've got tanks and Humvees and hundreds of thousands of soldiers. You're not going to take them over with a few hundred, even a few thousand unarmed people. That just isn't going to happen. And true, the other thing that has been very troubling, the only person that actually died from the event that day was a Trump supporter, Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran who was shot by a Capitol police officer. She was unarmed. And, you know, the whole explanation of that has been very, very suspect. There was talk about, lots of people died that day. No one died that day. There was a couple of people died of a heart attack the next day. And the person that they celebrated and called a martyr, and he, certainly a good public servant, but he died of a stroke. And it was several days after. It had nothing to do with what happened on January the 6th. So there's a lot of questions yet to be answered about it. But I want to make clear, I don't think we're ever going to get a level of justice as long as Merrick Garland is running the Justice Department and as long as the media will cover for what really did happen that day. Again, those folks who committed criminal activity, they deserve to suffer, but they don't deserve to be put in solitary confinement for months over something that turns out to be a misdemeanor.
Governor, not only do we have folks watching from Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona today, we have a viewer from the Netherlands joining us as well today. We also have a super chat from Jonathan who says, Governor Huckabee is my hero.
Nice. Thank you, Jonathan.
We appreciate that. And a question from Melbourne, Australia. Alexander is writing, I know that Biden is suffering from some kind of dementia. What is your take on that? I find it very frightening that he is the leader of the free world.
Well, Alexander, I don't know that I can answer that in the sense I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not a psychiatrist, nor have I had the opportunity to personally evaluate him, even if I were a doctor or a psychiatrist. So when someone says he definitely has, I want to be very careful from my perspective of ever pretending to be a doctor or even playing one on television, because I'm not. There are things that are very troubling, and I certainly as an observer can recognize that and say, I'm not a doctor, but someone who is really ought to try to find out why it is that he loses his place so often. he gets to a point in a sentence where he just begins to mumble incoherently, and he seems to sometimes lack the ability to know which door to leave from. There are many, many issues about his cognitive ability, and I don't know, but I'm hoping that there will be some solid answers coming out, and that his medical exam will be released to the public as it normally is with the president. And let me add, thank you for watching from Melbourne, Australia. How delightful that you have joined us from halfway around the world. Hey, let's play this little clip. It's something that is, and this really just upsets me to no end. Joe Biden was asked, because there were rumors and stories reported first in the Wall Street Journal, that the Biden administration was getting ready to pay up to $450,000 to illegal immigrants because maybe they weren't processed fast enough and their families had been separated. Now, keep in mind, the reason their families got separated because they came over here illegally at the hands of coyotes and cartel members who perhaps had gotten them through, and they got separated. It's a horrible tragedy, and we hate that. But why should the taxpayers of this country pay up to, this is a lot of money, $450,000. I bet that's more money than most everybody watching today makes, some in their lifetime. But this would be paid out of your pocket to illegal immigrants. Joe said, oh no, that's not true. That's garbage. And then he had to walk it back. Watch this clip.
Your administration is planning to pay illegal immigrants who are separated from their families at the border up to $450,000 each, possibly $1 million per family.
But it's not true.
So this is a garbage report.
Yeah,
Okay, so
$450,000 per person. Is that what you're saying?
that was separated from a family member at the border under the last administration.
That's not going to happen.
The president is perfectly comfortable with the Department of Justice settling with the individuals and families who are currently in litigation with the U.S. government.
The figures of compensation that is being handled by the Department of Justice is in the context of the Federal Tort Claims Act cases.
So there you have it. On November the 3rd, Joe Biden says, no, that's a garbage report. Well, it turns out that the garbage is the policy of the Biden administration. Garbage, that seems to be his policy. Because on the 4th, his acting press secretary for the day came out and said, well, this is compassionate. And she went on a long tirade about how awful the previous administration was, even though we didn't have this kind of mess at the border when Trump was in office. And then Mayorkas, who is the DHS secretary, affirms that the Department of Justice is making these settlements. And the ACLU corrected Joe Biden. So was he lying to us? Was he unaware? Either way, it's troubling. But I want to get to the heart of it. The lack of communication and accuracy of it, that's minor. The big deal is that you, the taxpayers of America, are shelling out hundreds of thousands of dollars per person to people who shouldn't be in this country in the first place. And that's not a lack of compassion on my part. I've got compassion for families in America who can't afford Thanksgiving dinner this year because the Biden inflation policies are going to make it so that a $12 turkey in 2020 is going to cost you $21 this year. I'd like to know where Joe's compassion is about how hard it is for a single mom to fill up her car with gas so she can get her kids to daycare and get herself to work every day, since gas is $1.50 to $2 higher than it was a year ago. Show some compassion to that single mom who is an American taxpayer who can't afford to pay the rent because of inflation. So please don't throw me the compassion argument. I ain't buying it, not even a little bit. Okay.
Good.
Questions?
Good stuff. Super chat from David Mizrahi. Thank you for that, David. Is Nancy Pelosi competing with Kamala Harris on who has a more insane laughter attack?
What a great question. I love it. Too bad we didn't get a compilation of some of Kamala Harris's cackles and Nancy Pelosi's giggles.
We can do that.
Yeah, I bet we can. I bet we will, just because that's a great suggestion. Yeah, they're both annoying as heck. I can tell you that. And I hear them and I'm thinking, I can't unhear that. and I wish I could. Okay.
Okay. Furball Ami writes, can you remind your viewers that not all Democrats are progressive and far left? There are some of us blue dog Democrats that believe in being fiscally responsible and pro-American voting for Trump.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact. I long for the day when Democrats and Republicans aren't that different, when they both love America deeply. For example, there used to be a pretty significant blue dog caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives, and they were significant and they had quite a bit of power because there were a lot of them. They mostly were from the South and the Midwest, but these are mostly pro-Second Amendment, many of them very pro-life. They believed in fiscal sanity. They did not believe in running up huge government debt, and they weren't wanting to raise taxes. But here's sadly what happened. Those Democrats were systematically pushed out of their own party by people like Nancy Pelosi. And in their place have come people from the far left, the AOCs and the Rashida Tlaib and others who are just out there in ways that, you know, I miss the folks that used to be there. And, you know, if you look back, John Kennedy was a Democrat unlike anything we see today. He was pro-life. He was an anti-communist. He led one of the biggest tax reductions in American history. You know, he would not recognize his party. And there were a lot of Democrats. Sam Nunn of Georgia was one of those Democrats, and a host of others. I wish we had some now that would take charge of their party. Hey, you know what? I'll even throw another one at you. You might be surprised. Go back and look at Bill Clinton's administration. His first year was a disaster, 1993. He tried to really push things to the left, but he got a royal spanking in 93 in the special elections, one of which was the one I won lieutenant governor in Arkansas with. And then in 94, really took a shellacking. And to his credit, Bill Clinton's always been a smart enough politician that he learns from mistakes. And so then he worked with Republicans to do welfare reform. You may remember he said the era of big government is over. He was pro border control. And quite frankly, his leadership as president led to the first time in a generation that we had a balanced budget. People forget that. But he was a Democrat who was practical, which, by the way, leads us to something James Carville said this week in light of the elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Very significant. He calls out his party. This is the same James Carville who was Clinton's advisor. He understands what Americans will tolerate. Listen to what James Carville says about his own party.
What's wrong with this stupid wokeness? All right, you don't just look at Virginia and New Jersey. Look at Long Island. Look at Buffalo. Look at Minneapolis. Even look at Seattle, Washington. I mean, just defund the police lunacy to take Abraham Lincoln's name off of schools. I mean, that people see that, and it's just really have a suppressive effect all across the country. The Democrats, some of these people need to go to a woke detox center or something.
I've always liked James Carville, even if I disagree with it. I've done several different events with him over the past decade or so, where, you know, it'd be like someone from the left, someone from the right, and we would appear before some association, trade group or something and talk. I always found him to be a fascinating guy, a fun guy to be around, but I appreciate his candor. We don't see that in politics enough. And he clearly understands, as he called it, this stupid wokeness. Those are his words. And he said it's killing his party. And he is absolutely right, because people are rejecting it. And I think that the Democrat, like you just got the comment from, great example of people who do not feel like they've got a home in the far left Democratic Party today. Okay.
So many folks in the chat today, Gov, and we're so appreciative of those that are spending some time with us this afternoon on a Friday afternoon. So keep the questions coming, because we can still fit you in. Troy Post has written in, with Biden's mandates, Governor, do you feel that he will demand disabled vets get vaccinated to continue receiving their disability benefits?
I mean, that would be outrageous, but nothing surprises me anymore. You know, they just now released the OSHA guidelines that if you are an employer with 100 more or more employees, you're going to have the vaccination. But here's what's interesting. Did you notice they keep pushing it back? It was going to be a couple of months ago. Then it was going to be right now. Now they're saying January 4th. So if it's urgent, If people are dying, if it's the most important thing in the whole world, then why does it not matter for the next 2 months? I don't understand that. But I thought the best thing I heard was an employer who had 104 employees. He's just over that threshold. So he's going to have to ask all of his people to be vaccinated. He said, my solution is easy. I'm going to fire 5 Democrats and get under the 100 threshold. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, whatever works.
That was pretty powerful. Speaking of that, the director of the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, Rochelle Walensky, says she's unsure of how many people in her own agency have been vaccinated. Now stop and think of, this is the agency that is pushing for every person to be vaccinated by mandate of the government. Look, I think for most of us, vaccination does make a whole lot of sense, and I'm not afraid of it. And I know some people are. I got dear friends who think it's the mark of the beast, and that's fine. I don't like the mandate. I'm fine with the vaccination as a personal health decision. But I don't understand, if it is so vital and it is critical, why doesn't Rochelle Walensky, who heads the CDC, not even know how many people in her agency are vaccinated? Watch her squirm on this one.
What percent of CDC employees are vaccinated?
We're actively encouraging vaccination in all of our employees and doing a lot of education and outreach in order to get our agency fully vaccinated.
But the percent?
I don't have that for you today.
I don't have that for you today. Why not? I mean, why not? Why is it that you impose rules on other people, you do not impose them on your own agency? It's outrageous. Okay.
We've got a super chat from Jonathan this afternoon, Gov. Do you believe the Biden administration and liberals are restructuring the country for one world government?
I don't know if they're doing it consciously, but they certainly are doing it in a compliant way. And I'll give you a couple of specific examples. I don't want to just make some outrageous statement. Yeah, they're moving us toward one world government. They have recently talked about a minimal global tax. Now, folks, that's globalism at its worst. That means that all of the countries of the world would be expected to have a minimum tax upon its citizens. Well, it is none of the business of France or Germany or the UK or the Bahrain or anyone else what we tax our people. And we have no reason at all to let some other country or some group of countries dictate to us what our tax rate's going to be. The Paris Climate Accords, once again, Obama got us in it. Trump got us out of it. Now Biden's putting us back in there. And what did the Chinese and the Indian government say about that? Fine, y'all go ahead and do that. We're not doing it. They're the biggest polluters. 90% of the pollution in the world comes from pretty much those two countries. And they basically thumbed their nose at the rest of the world and said, we'll pollute all we want because we're trying to build our countries and we don't care what you think. And so what it means is Americans are going to suffer with higher energy prices, higher cost of everything, while the Chinese are beating our brains out. This is insanity. So bottom line, the answer to your question, yes. Yes, I think that's where we're headed.
We have Robert McLean with us today, and he has provided us with a super chat, bringing his question to the top. Why are the members of Congress not taking a stand for the men wrongfully languishing in the D.C. prison from the January 6th Capitol debacle?
Some of them have. And so to be fair, there have been quite a few of the members of Congress. I believe Steve Scalise, I've heard him speak about it, Dan Crenshaw, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. A lot of people don't like her. I kind of like her spunk. Don't agree with everything she says, and sometimes maybe she's a little out there. But you know what? She got elected by the people of her district, and I appreciate that she's unafraid. All of that to say, I think there are some, but to be fair, not enough, and they're not speaking loud enough. And of course, it's also, no matter how much they speak, they're not going to get any credit or attention from the mainstream media, who will never even give it attention. Hey, that's pretty much going to maybe give all the questions we have for the day. But you can still leave questions in the comments. We love to get those. And I do really hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, and be sure to join us every time when we have these live chats, usually on Friday afternoon. Do not miss the show this week. Winsome Sears, among many of our wonderful guests that we have, which will include, by the way, Ambassador David Friedman, former ambassador to Israel. We'll talk about the peace accords. Watch this to see what you'll see on the Huckabee Show this week.
This week on Huckabee, David Friedman and the Abraham Accord, the Babylon Bees' Joel Berry, the clean comedy of John Branyan.
So when you cover up your stupidity, you are robbing people of a blessing.
John Agar's Impossible Mile, and country singer Tia Goins perform. Watch Huckabee on Saturday at 8, 7 Central, and again on Sunday at 9, 8 Central, right here on TBN.